Before you begin, index where the shock absorber meets its protective sleeve. This is going to be your curb height. This video will omit a lot of basic information. It'll be fast paced. Control arms about 95 each. The insulators about 50 for the pair. Remove the negative battery terminal, raise the vehicle, and remove the wheel and tire. Remove the cotter pin. Use a 19mm socket to loosen up the castle nut. And then use a tool like this to loosen up the tie rod. Now the boot's gonna be fine. You can push it down. Some grease is gonna come out. The tool takes a 19mm socket and then just tighten it. Boom, there it is. Next, remove your end link. Start spraying down the castellated nut on the ball joint, the bolts and the nuts on the lower control arm assembly. Spray them down with some penetrating fluid. When it comes time to slide out this control arm bolt, the rack and pinion is going to be in the way. It is good to move it out of the way right now. It is held in place by two pairs of fasteners. Hold the bolt using a 15mm socket and remove the nut with an 18mm socket. Remove the pinch bolt that secures the intermediate shaft to the steering gear using a 13mm socket. Now you can use a pry bar to free up the steering gear. Secure it. A better way to secure it is to place jack stands under it. At this point, I loosen the pivot nuts. That way the control arm can swing downward to remove the spring. Hold the bolt with the 21mm wrench and back off the nut one turn with a 24mm socket. Do this for both pairs on this side. Loosen, but do not remove the nuts at this point. Place a jack under the control arm, but not fully touching it. I leave about 1/16 of an inch. The jack is going to be protecting us from the coil spring. Now start removing the ball joint castle nut. Make sure the castle nut is flush with the top of the ball joint stud. Then I'm using a modified tool like this to separate the ball joint from the steering knuckle. Kaboom, right? This is the modified tool. It's from Harbor Freight. I just cut off a little bit more right here, and it fits beautifully. It's a real handy tool to separate the ball joint. The control arm is ready to swing down. The castle nut is protecting us from the coil spring. The jack is there as a backup. At this point, fully support the control arm with the jack and remove the ball joint's castle nut. And now we're going to drop the spring. We're going to drop the jack little by little. No, that was too fast. No. This would be lower than that. Make sure you have a good jack. At a snail's pace, just like that. That's fine. Not gonna take any chances with that spring. And since the lower control arm is sort of loose, the bolts and the nuts, that lower control arm should drop down smoothly. And right there, it looks like the spring tension is gone. I see that. Yeah, there it is. All right, now you can remove your spring. Now fully remove the control arm's fasteners. There will be a bolt in the way. Remove using a 15mm socket. To get the control arm back in, you'll use the weight of the car. I'm using the old insulator to protect the floor. So raise the vehicle up to the point where both of the metal pieces right here are touching the frame. That's good. Now simply lower the vehicle. This guy's getting to get in the way. Now raise the vehicle a bit, swing up the control arm, and place another floor jack to finish up aligning the bolt holes. Yeah. Insert the bolts, but don't fully tighten down the nuts. So our new control arm is set. The new insulator is already up there. And whenever you see your spring, there's going to be 2 holes on the control arm. Make sure that the spring only covers one of them. Make sure that one doesn't get covered. Next, on your coil spring, you're going to remove the insulator. It just yanks right off. For the new insulator, I put some lubricant on the inside of it and then just pushed it in there. It slid right in. Now we're ready to install the coil spring compressor tool. Alright, so here's our compressed spring. You're going to want to put the threaded rod in first, and then we're going to line the top so that only one of those bottom holes is covered. And now we're going to bring this up. Here's a little trick I learned. Make sure this sits before putting in the insulator so it can sit perfectly, all right? Now we put in our insulator, and this guy should come in there like nothing. Get in there. And there you go. Now we're gonna put a jack under here. So I use the jack to jack up from the ball joint, but this threaded rod might get in your way. So a good alternative is to use a bottle jack, sitting on some blocks of wood. When you get this up, thread in your ball joint castle nut, and then we're gonna take off the spring compressor. Basically, you just loosen up the barrel nut very slowly and it should come out. Now that you got the spring compressor out, you can put a jack under the ball joint and raise this up to curb height. Match up that index mark you made at the beginning. Torque the ball joint's castle nut to 129 foot-pounds and the lower control arm nuts to 148 foot-pounds. Reconnect your steering components. The pinch bolt is torqued to 25 foot-pounds and the steering gear nuts to 35 foot-pounds. Tie rod castle nut 41 foot-pounds. Put back your end link and grease up any parts that need grease. And that should be it. We're getting close to finishing here. The rest should be easy. If your bushings were severely worn and you got an alignment at the time, the new bushings and insulators could change that. It is recommended to get an alignment. This is not an easy job. If you got it done, congratulations. You just completed one of the harder jobs on this vehicle. There's more New Age Mustang content on the way.